All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us. My name is Dianne Tavares, and I am just delighted to be here with you today. I am a homeschool mom of three, ages pre-K through third grade. And here at HSLDA, I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Compassion Grant Programs, which is how HSLDA comes alongside families that are in financial hardship to help them continue homeschooling through those hard times. So I am thrilled to be joined today by one of HSLDA's dynamic speakers, Cheri Kay Sessions. Cheri Kay, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, in other topics, we might talk more about your PhD in physical therapy and years of experience helping families serve their children's special educational needs. But today, what I'm so excited about is that you get to be here just as a homeschool mom. Right. So for our audience, Cheri Kay is a single mom with personal experience in adoption and unique learners. So, Cheri, why don't you just quickly share with us how long you've been homeschooling, how many children you have, things like that.
Yeah, so I have 4 children, although 2 are now adults. So I guess
That still counts, right? They're
I
always,
know,
always our
oh.
children.
So I have one that's 21, one that's 19, a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I started homeschooling back in 2017 when I pulled my oldest daughter right after her 6th grade year from public school. And then I just kept going with my 10-year-old when she started kindergarten. She's now in 4th grade. So a total of 7 years now. And since I have a 2-year-old, I'm anticipating a few more years.
Yeah, you get to restart.
That's right.
Do it all better, right? We learn from our mistakes each time we go.
That's right. Except each kid likes to keep us on our toes and make us do something completely different.
Because no two of them are the same either.
Never.
That's for sure. Well, today we are going to be talking about homeschooling during life changes and sharing a little bit about how HSLDA can help so that homeschooling can still be possible in the midst of some of those hard times. So for our audience, just know this is going to be an interactive live. So please put questions for me or Cheri Kay in the comments. We welcome your questions and we would love to address some of those if you have them. Personally, I am really excited to be talking about this topic because I think it is much more common in the homeschool community than one might expect. And Cheri Kay, you and I have talked about this before too, about how there are so many different changes that come through life. I mean, life is change. You could say that. I mean, things hardly ever stay the same. And even if it's just our kids growing older, but the chances are that if you homeschool long enough, you will end up homeschooling probably through a season of life change, whether that's an income source that changes, job loss, moving, a medical issue, a relationship challenge within a family, the diagnosis of a special needs, the loss of a loved one, just the list goes on, right? So I think that this is a great topic to cover and one that hopefully will be really meaningful to the families that are going to watch it. So, so Cheri Kay, let's dive into the topic and see what golden nuggets we can offer from our areas of expertise, mainly yours. I guess my first question for you to start us off would be, as I'm experiencing a life change and all the emotions and the logistical upheaval that can come along with that, how can I maintain consistency in my homeschool? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, all those things you listed and a million other things that can pop up in our lives, right? And with my situation, all of my kids are adopted, so they also have special needs. So we have lots of medical appointments, and there's a new kid adding to the family sometimes. Or what I have found is when people say, "How do you do that?" I had to actually stop and think about it. I'm like, I don't know. Don't I just have to? But how do I do that? Yeah. And as I prayed about it, the word that came to me was grace. And if you look it up, the definition, there's a few different ones. And while one of the first ones we might think about is like beautiful movement, ballet, that's not my homeschool day. I'm going to put that right out there right now. You do not see a beautiful ballet all day. Well, my 10-year-old might be doing ballet in the living room. That's not that's not the flow of our homeschool day.
I hear you. Yes.
Yay! Can we get an amen to that?
Yes.
The definition of grace that I'm talking about is one of a temporary exemption or reprieve. During a regular day, we moms and dads and homeschool families have lots of plates in the air, lots of kids doing different things. The house has to be taken care of, appointments, phone calls, all the things, right? And then you add in a life change of a new baby or an illness or any of the things we've just listed, and something's got to give. Something. And it's okay on a daily basis to say, what's going to get grace today? Oftentimes, I'll be honest, it's my dishes. My dishes get a lot of grace. They just don't get done sometimes. They just don't get done. Or sometimes maybe I'm giving grace to myself. And I'm finding things that my student can do more independently because I've got to make phone calls or I have got to do other things. So sometimes I get the grace. Sometimes my kid gets the grace. Sometimes she needs a little bit less intense of a day. Sometimes
I love that because it's not a focus on how am I failing because I didn't get this done. You know, we didn't get to everything on the list, or I didn't, so I feel like a failure as a homeschooler. It's actually, where do I need grace?
Grace.
That's such a great shift in how you think about what you're letting go from a to-do list that's too heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. I give grace to the curriculum sometimes, like, curriculum, you are too strict today. We're not doing this. We're going to do something a little more fun today. We'll come back to it, but
we're going to have a hands-on day or a field trip to the library day.
That's right. And grace isn't a permanent exemption. It's a temporary exemption. It's a day. Or maybe if there's a long illness, maybe it's a week or two. It's not a give up. It's a pause. We're going to pause on this hard thing right now today. Because when you're going through a hard time, there will be days you can handle the curriculum, and there will be days that you can't. There will be days you can handle getting the dishes done first thing in the morning or right after breakfast or whatever it is, and there will be days that you can't.
Pat on the back for those days, right?
So I really, really have held on to that grace and allowing something to have grace every day, whatever that may be. And on days that I'm not having a huge life change.
Well, and that sounds like a great way also to acknowledge, I mean, the reason they're called life changes is because they're not the small things, right? It's the big stuff. And so I feel like acknowledging that and acknowledging, we all know that homeschooling is more than just inside the education part of your world. When you're a homeschooler, that homeschooling is part of so much of your life. It's organically woven into so many parts of your life. And so if a life change comes along, it feels like that's an important thing to acknowledge. And I love that the grace is a way to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The next thing I do is plan. So I actually plan with grace in mind. So I don't have, my plan is in pencil. And my plan gives extra time for our family because of all the special needs, doctor's appointments, multiple children with one parent. I plan for a year-round schedule because I know we're going to have lots of days off or it's going to change. And that way I'm not panicking. I can't do this because I need to do this math page or whatever. I plan for a year-round. And that gives us that flexibility that we need. Maybe you plan to have some supports in place so that you can make sure that math stays on and, you don't have to worry about that part. Maybe you put together a independent box. So things that the child can do independently on those days that you are going to be more busy with phone calls or appointments or, because it seems like whenever there's a big change, there's always a lot of phone calls and appointments, right? Whether it's a medical illness or a move or a new job or
There's logistical challenges
all that
usually
stuff.
involved.
There's more phone calls and more appointments. So maybe you put together an independent box with puzzles or books
Mm.
or worksheets that the student can do a little bit more on their own. Games that siblings can play together or whatever. And then that way, if you need 20 minutes or whatever, you can say, okay, everybody go get their box and you guys work on that stuff while I take care of this phone
Ooh, I
call.
like that idea of kids having their own box. So it's not, let's go to the joint box and fight over the material.
Right.
Let's have their own box and we can avoid the arguments altogether.
Right.
Good
The other
idea.
thing I did when I had a lot of littles in my house, I had a special closet with the preferred toys.
Mm.
And then when I needed a minute to focus on somebody's schoolwork or something, they each got a blanket in actually separate corners of the house where they couldn't see each other. And then they each got a preferred toy and they had to stay on their blanket. And it was things like Legos or Duplo blocks or the magnetic tiles, or one of the favorites was like the barn with all the farm animals, and they could play with that. And so they each got a preferred toy that only came out when mama needed them to come out. And they each got their blanket and they stayed on their blanket. And I usually could get 20 minutes. And as they started getting a little restless, I'd rotate them. And then they got somebody else and it worked great. And so then
Well, they might have even asked you to homeschool at that point because they would have wanted to play with their toys. So that's a great idea.
And they were good toy. It wasn't a phone, right? Like it was building blocks and pretend play and whatever, I was still building their brain in those moments. So it was still
I think engaging their creativity and their imagination.
Right. So plan for that stuff. Have a closet of preferred toys. Have a box of individual work boxes that you only pull out at special times.
Something I'm hearing you say too is prioritization. Like it sounds like you thought through that, the math needed to continue. So I'm going to put whatever limited energy I have into making sure that continues, and then be okay with things that kind of fall off the menu. How would you say you've gone about bringing prioritization to making those decisions so that you can even make a plan for what gets grace or what doesn't on any given day?
Yeah, so I think that changes depending on the kid when you think about where they are academically. So part of the plan is to keep track of where they're functioning academically. With my daughter, she's deaf, so her language is behind. So language is always a priority. Reading, language, all of that stuff is always first above math, because you can't learn without language. So where my son, he struggles with math and he's an amazing reader. So for him, I would let the reading go and make sure that math continues. So I think it depends on where that child is and what they need. Maybe your child is struggling to want to do school though, and they need grace. So maybe you're going to let their weakness go for a little bit and just focus on where they're strong so that they gain that love of learning again. And then you slowly add in where they're struggling. So I think it's important to look at the situation and decide, if I had to pick one thing, what would that be? And it will vary depending on the child and their needs.
And I'm sure that having people around you who maybe are able to speak into that for you or speak into it for your kids is helpful. Talk about that support aspect.
Yeah, that's the next part of planning. And I know asking for help is hard. Yes. I'm the first one to be scared to ask for help, or
I want to be there for everybody else. I am the first to say, call me if you need something. But when I actually have to reach out, it's hard.
It is. But when you think about it, I had to kind of do a little bit of mental gymnastics for this. I'm not just asking for help for me, I'm asking for help for my kids. And when I put my kids in the mix, I can ask for help, right? Because I'll do it for them. I'll do it for me too. And it's important to do it for ourselves, but it helped me to remember that it's not just for me, it's for them. So maybe you need to look for an older teenager that can come and read in the afternoons while you're making dinner, or maybe they can tutor in math, or maybe they can help with the lawn, or somebody else can make dinner, or maybe one of the things I've done is I've also really looked for support online. So I went through counseling myself, and I used a virtual situation because I couldn't drag all these kids everywhere. So look there. I also use a reading program for my deaf children where it's a native signer reading a book to them. So I will put her on. She's getting solid language, good literacy, and I get 10 minutes to go to the bathroom or whatever. So find those little things that are solid and helpful, and then have those planned in so that you can have a couple seconds to do the things that you need to do, whether it's a phone call or clean the bathroom, or
or just breathe.
Breathe.
Or cry. Sometimes 5-minute cry is really cathartic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All in there. Yeah. I love that. And some of the talking about support, some of the things that here in Compassion we hear from families who are going through a lot of changes. We end up assisting a lot of families who just find themselves in a hard time because of an unexpected life change. And I think they would agree wholeheartedly. Everything's harder when you go through it alone, and I think our bandwidth contracts in seasons when we don't have as much emotional energy to pursue things. And so often community, meeting up with friends, that's one of those things that goes out the window, right? It's one of the things that feels optional. So it's one of the first things to go, right? When you've got to get all these other things done. But then we get more overwhelmed, and we don't text or call, and we don't attend the events where we run into the people that would be there to offer that support to us. So yeah, I think learning to let those people in, to reach out, to be the ones ready to receive help, and to remember, to your point, that it's a blessing for them to be able to be there for us sometimes. It helps us when we can get out of our own heads and serve someone else. And so giving our friends, in a sense, that chance to do that and to serve us too is something that's good to remember, to not close ourselves off from community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to use those supports to, like you said, cry, or, really take that time to spend with God for 5 minutes. It's so easy to let that go, our quiet time with him, when you're bombarded with phone calls, appointments, children, all the things. And then this oh my gosh, I have to educate my child as well.
And to think that 5 minutes may not be enough. Sometimes you think, oh, if I can't do 15 minutes, if I can't spend 30 minutes, I won't be able to be refreshed in just 5 minutes. So I'll just spend my 5 minutes doing something else instead, rather than saying, no, even just 5 minutes can refresh you.
Yes, because God knows, right? This is not a surprise to him. There's nothing about your situation that is shocking to him. So those 5 minutes, he's going to make super, super valuable to you 100% of the time.
Yeah. And because he's the only one who really knows how hard this is that you're going through. Again, getting back to that idea of acknowledging what you're going through. I think when families go through things, just being able to acknowledge this is a big thing. I think in Compassion, one of the things that our staff just love the most is that we feel like we have this front row seats to some of the most courageous homeschoolers in the country. Some of the things they're going through, we are constantly amazed and inspired by their perspective going through it. I mean, the conviction that there is more going on in this hard time than just what we can see in the moment in the hard time. I mean, that keeping that hopeful perspective, and that understanding there's more going on. It's really hard, but I think it's really, really important. I was thinking about how I could say Cheri Kay, I woke up this morning and it was dark and it was cold and the house was loud and I got interrupted 20 times as I was trying to get out the door to come to work. Or I could say, I woke up this morning and there was a beautiful spring rain falling, which is going to bring wonderful summer flowers. And the house was kind of loud because my children are active and healthy and curious.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to tell me all these things that they're learning, which means I get interrupted sometimes, but it's because they want to share these things with me. And
Right.
it's all about that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think finding that person or those people also who can help you keep yourself in that right frame of mind
Yes.
can be very wise, because it's hard to hold on to that perspective all on your own.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And speaking of being on your own, I want to ask you this question. What encouragement would you say you would want to give to single parents who are homeschooling in particular? Because I feel like there's a lot of kind of
Mhm.
unique hardships there, or even parents who maybe they're married, but for whatever reason they find themselves carrying the mother load during this
Mhm.
particular life season, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What would you say to
Yeah. So all the things that I said before, grace, plan, all those things, but
Great,
also,
great, great.
and this goes for anybody, but I think sometimes those of us who are really questioning if we're doing well enough, if we're doing it right, maybe I can't do this because I'm single and I've got too much on my plate and I have to do all this stuff. Remember, you can do it and hold on to your why. It's your why that is going to be why you don't fail.
Mm.
So that why did I decide to homeschool in the first place is why you are doing it so well, and you will do it well, and why you care about it. So this is your reason. Hang on to that even in the hard times when you think I should just put them back in school, public school, or we've all had
Mm.
that thought.
Or
Um,
I can't do this. I can't do another day.
to
I
do
can't
it.
go another day.
Think back to that why, because that why was strong enough for you to start, and it'll be the thing that helps you keep your focus. So put it on a piece of paper, write it on the bathroom mirror, put it on the fridge, whatever you need to do. What is that why?
Yes, I love the visualization idea. I think having something visual in front of you makes a lot of sense. Do you find that sometimes also the why evolves as you go through it? You maybe get into homeschooling for one reason, but then maybe your why evolves as you uncover new things, discover new ways it's impacting and benefiting your family.
Yeah,
Maybe
there may
finding
be
that
multiple
gradual.
whys. It may not be one
Yeah.
reason. You don't have to have one reason you homeschool. There's going to be multiple reasons, and it can change for sure. I know my main why for my 21-year-old when I pulled her back in 6th grade is way different than my why for my 10-year-old
Hmm.
currently. So, yeah, absolutely, it can be different, and it may be different for different kids. I
Sure.
mean, there's a big time difference between my first one and my 10-year-old, but, you know, which is a big part of the reason there's a difference for the why. But, yeah, it can be different for different kids. It can be different in different seasons of your life, but, hold on to that and then plan. You have to have it planned, and it has to be in writing, in pencil, but you have to have something down because, I mean, unless you have a better brain than I do, when I get overwhelmed, I can't remember anything. I don't even know what we're supposed to do the next day for our academics, right?
Well,
So
you get tunnel vision because
yeah,
you're focused in on what that change or that hard thing is that's coming. It's drawn all of your attention, right? And yeah, everything else just fades to blurry.
yes. So have it written down, have checklists, have a plan so that you can, on those days where you're completely like, I don't even know what we're doing today. Are we even here today? You can pull out that plan and it can help refocus you and you don't feel so overwhelmed. So
Mm.
make sure that there's some plans.
Have you found that your kids can help you with that? For example, I found that my 8-year-old, my oldest is a daughter, and she just enjoys organization, and so she's done a wonderful job at being our list maker. I can
Awesome.
assign that to her, and she will write up the to-do list. I can be there making breakfast and just telling her what to write down, and she'll do. And I remember discovering this and thinking, why hadn't I used this? You get to run the practice. I don't have to do it. Have you discovered any hacks, life hacks like that?
Yeah. So if I left that to my daughter, we would never homeschool. Let me tell you that.
Know your kid, rule number one.
Depends on the child. But they will definitely teach you how to make it more efficient, right? So let them show you how they learn best. My current 10-year-old, she has shown me that she needs to be moving when she learns. She has to bounce on a big exercise ball, or she needs to spin, or we need to do a dance and then do math. And I find her, while I'm explaining science, I find her doing her tap dance. So allow them to show you how they learn best, and don't necessarily try to change that. Use what they're saying, use what they're telling you to make your teaching and their learning more effective. I'm
observation.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
No, I just want to give a shout out to everybody out there commenting. Thank you so much. I see all the hugs and where you're from and all that coming through. So that's awesome. I'm so excited to see all of you. What was your question?
Well, I was going to follow up with that to say, I feel like when you go through a life change, also, you forget to observe, right? Going back to tunnel vision and the other things getting blurry. Maybe it's just an issue of perspective, but are there some things that you have used in the past, things that you just say to yourself in the morning or think to yourself in the morning when you wake up, or whenever it may be, on that bathroom mirror you were talking about earlier, that just help you get back into that mind frame of observing your kids and being present with your kids during the time that you can, because sometimes that life change can make it really hard to be present when you know you should be, but you're overwhelmed by this larger thing you're going through, and your kids really need you there with them, and yet it feels really hard to be able to be present with them.
So I try to remind myself, and I will often write this down as a reminder, when they're crying and I'm noticing that they're crying more often or they're behavioral a little bit more, that's their cue that they need me. They don't know how to tell me that, but that's my cue that I've been too distant. So I try to remember not to get frustrated when they seem a little more crabby, whiny, they cry at the drop of a hat. I'm like, oh, that's on me. I have been too distant for too long, and I will stop and give. Usually our kids really need 10 minutes. Maybe, I know right before we came on, my 2-year-old was letting me know. And so I gave her 10 minutes with me on the trampoline. I actually jumped on the trampoline for 10 minutes before this. So
good for you.
Or to be having this right now. Like, I would have a crying 2-year-old on my lap. So I try to reframe their behavior into, what am I missing? And so I think that that's what, and I don't want to say it's okay to get to that point, because when we get overwhelmed, it happens. But I think that that's a common cue from our kids when they get whiny or cry easily. They probably just need some connection with mom.
Yeah. That kind of leads into another question that we had here, which is, what if there are gaps that come up in my homeschool journey that might occur during this period of our family's life? As we give grace to those different things that we let slide a little bit, those might turn into longer gaps. How do we then address those, both at the time and then maybe in the future when we look back?
Yep. So your plan is important, because it's going to give you plan for grace, right? And you're going to plan that things aren't going to go perfect. Because if your plan is too rigid, you're for sure going to fall off, right? Well, at least I am. Okay, maybe not everybody.
And then you turn from being fun homeschool mom to homeschool mom who feels like a failure, who then is not the nicest mom to your kids, even with the things that you could have done with your kids. So it's lose-lose for everybody.
Yep. So to decrease the gaps, you got to have that plan, and you really try to give grace, not to everything all at the same time, but to bits and pieces of it. If it ends up being where the entire thing needs to have grace and be set aside and you need a break, the short answer is that depends on the state you live in. Some states have some really strict rules about the number of days you educate, what months, what time frames, those sorts of things. So if you live in one of those sticky states, be sure to reach out to an HSLDA, your legal representative, to talk through that and make sure that you're still meeting the rules and regulations of your state. If you're a little more lucky and you have a lot more flexibility in that stuff, then really just keep track of what you do, when you are not in that gap. And remember that learning takes place all the time. It does not have to be in a curriculum. Just because you don't have the book out and you're working from that book, it doesn't mean that your kids aren't learning something. Maybe during a really hard time, your kids have learned how to manage keeping the house clean while maybe mom has a prolonged sickness, and they've really had to learn how to care for siblings and help with the home and help with making dinners and that sort of thing. You got home ec that year. Maybe you got some math with measuring and following recipes and that kind of thing. Maybe they had to run more errands. Maybe they got some civics in learning to put the stamps on the envelope and getting it to the mailbox and picking up the mail and using UPS or whatever. So really just remember that learning takes place all the time. We're
not just educating our children, are we? We're raising them.
That's right.
We're raising them up to be adults. And I feel like what you're talking about is touching into so much more of like their character and what passions are they going to have and what values are they going to have, which might be affected by a life change.
Right.
Life change might really shape those and mold those in them. And so we don't want to get in the way of that. So I love that, giving yourself kind of some flexibility, tracking what you can.
Different types of learning that will happen during that time. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes, that is okay. That's important for us to hear. That is okay. Very important. Well, speaking of learning in different ways and such, can you share some ways that we could, in those times, afford resources when our homeschool is on a tight budget? Because I feel like often life change will impact the budget. Those two often go hand in hand. So what's some things that we can share with the folks that have joined us?
So very few states actually have requirements around how you present material. They might have required subjects. They might have days and times limits that you have to meet and stuff like that. But most of them don't tell you how you have to get that content to your child. So you can technically homeschool with a library card. Go to the library. You're going to find everything you need in the library. So you can do that. If you do decide to get curriculum, don't be like me and get all excited about all the fun curriculum because they're all super exciting, and then have like 3 math curriculums and have your kid look at you like, well, what are you doing? Because this isn't fun. Plan your plan, find what you're going to use and stick to it. Don't buy the extra thing because it looks really fun. Try to stay out of the stores that have those things and you're like, oh, look, this is so fun. My kid will love this.
A few more stickers.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Stick to what you need. I know, right? Oh, I can totally fall into those traps of, oh, this looks like a fun little project. There's like a pile of like projects that I have. And I'm like, why did I buy those? So try to do that. Compassion has grants, and you talked a little bit about that, and I think we'll go into that a little
Mhm.
bit more later.
Yep.
Um, HSLDA has a member savings page. While it's not all directly homeschool related, anytime you can be nice to your budget is going to affect what you can do in another
Mhm.
part of your budget. Um, there's
For
an
sure.
article on HSLDA about free and inexpensive curriculum and resources. We will post that for you to see, and you can check out that link. Um, Another fun thing is the website Teachers Pay Teachers. There's a lot of educational lessons on there. Some are free, some have a small fee, some are a little bit more expensive. There's an amazing search bar. You put in what you want, and up pops a whole bunch of lessons, and you can
Mm.
filter them by price or grade or different things. So that's a great site to check out. Um, Always remember to ask about educator discounts in stores and
Mm.
field trips and zoos and all those places. Just ask if they have an educator discount and use your HSLDA card as a homeschool teacher, and you can often get those discounts also.
Mm. And then when you can't get the discount, there's always YouTube.
There
There's
is YouTube.
especially since COVID, there's no
Yep.
end to free
I
resources with
Yes, and
discussion.
even to this day, there are some that are sign language interpreted. I use YouTube frequently. If I'm not sure how to
Mm.
explain something in sign language, I'll look it up on YouTube and almost always find a short video that can explain what I'm trying to explain. So there's lots of fun things on YouTube, with wisdom, of course.
Yes.
Maybe not letting your littles try to Google or search on YouTube, because you might get some interesting videos, but there are some great things on YouTube as well.
Absolutely.
Um,
Excellent. Let's see what other resource well, maybe now would be a good time to go ahead and get into what some of the things that Compassion can offer on this. Let's see. So the main resources that HSLD offers through our Compassion program is our grants. And the curriculum grant is by far the most popular one that we do. And going to hslda.org/compassion provides a full listing of those grant programs. Mainly, HSLD, we just don't want financial concerns to be the deciding factor of whether or not a family continues homeschooling. If homeschooling is a good fit for a family and they just need, a little bit of help to be able to make that happen, then we want to make sure that they're able to get that possible. So so these curriculum grants help with they help homeschooling families in hard financial times with everything from curriculum and materials to educational technology, co-op fees, testing, therapies, classes, dual enrollments, etc. The grants are modest. They're about $100 to $200 per homeschooled family, and this is because we are a fully donor-funded ministry. So all of HSLDA Compassion's costs are supported 100% by private donors, which honestly it's beautiful and it's humbling to see how many people, several thousand families, give every year because they believe in what homeschooling families are doing and how important it is for them to be able to continue to offer that to their children and be successful in giving their children a homeschool that allows them to thrive and that kind of meets some of their needs. So for our audience, if you or someone that you know is going through a hard time, just know that we're here for them, and please encourage them to look at hslda.org/compassion to see a listing and learn more about those grants and see if there's anything that we can do to assist. So
Absolutely.
let's see, Cheri Kay, any other resources or ideas that you would want to share with people here as we're coming to
Yeah.
the end of our
I
time?
think I also just want to talk a little bit about kids with special needs.
Yes.
That can get a little more expensive sometimes when our kids have extra needs, and maybe they
Well, it
need
can be a little more
therapy.
challenging with a life change, right? I mean,
Right.
change is hard, I think, for humans in general, but sometimes it seems like there's an extra component there.
Yeah. Um, it can be a little harder on the budget with therapies and
Mhm.
travel and appointments, and you're trying to balance, all of that. If your child needs therapies, PT, OT, speech, something like that, and you're taking them during those harder times, maybe you want to stretch it out a little bit. Maybe you do once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month during that time of change, right? Like maybe when something, the move, or you take a little break from the therapies or something like that. So don't be afraid to get creative with the way therapies are utilized for your kid with special needs. I always say, regardless, our kids are more than their therapy anyway. Um, I'm a physical therapist by trade, and I've made parents take a break because that break provides the ability for mom to be mom, and the child needs mom more than therapy most of the time. Now, I'm not saying that about medication and life-saving issues, not at all, but for some of those other things, mom is going to be there forever, and that relationship is super important. And if therapy is causing so much stress, then it's not helping the way that it should. So, and if you're having to pay out of pocket, there are some grants out there. It takes a lot of searching. You can search by your child's diagnosis. It's really hard to find some of them, but you can really do some searching on different types of grants and scholarships out there. And don't be afraid to piecemeal them together. I know when my daughter needed a lot of therapies, and when I first started looking for grants, I was like, $100? That's going to cover one session. Like, yes. Right? But I got 3 or 4 grants, and I piecemealed them together and got her through 5 or 6 months. I also stretched them out. We went every other week instead of every week. That way I could do the exercises at home as part of my homeschool routine and just stretch it out over time. So try some of those things as you're trying to work with the struggles of outside therapies or interventions and stuff like that for your kids that need those.
It's a great recommendation. Well, we hope that this has been helpful. So you've been watching. I've seen lots of great comments coming in and recommendations. So thank you all for participating. And we just would encourage you to check out the various grants we have through HSLDA Compassion, and also the other resources that are available on hslda.org. It's just been lovely having you all with us today, and just getting to talk about something that I feel like maybe doesn't get as much coverage as it should. And so if you have ideas after this of other things that you would like us to cover, or ideas that you just want to share with the broader community, please just reach out to us, obviously through our Facebook page or through our contact form. We love to hear from you. And so we look forward to hearing any ideas that you have, even following up on this. So Cheri Kay, thank you for being with us today and everything that you had to share.
Thank you. Thank you. It was nice talking with you again. And I loved seeing everybody on their comments. It's so great to have you all here. I love it. It's super fun.
Yeah, well, everybody, we hope you have a fantastic wrap up to the school year if you're not done already, and we'll look forward to getting ready for next school year too. So everyone have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining. Bye-bye.